This story revolves around my grandfather. Now, my grandfather was not a literate, illegitimate, illegal immigrant, but he was illiterate in the sense that he couldn't read nor write. But what my grandfather was a thinker. You see, while we spend most of our time reading about, listening to, or hearing about what somebody else thinks, he didn't choose to do it that way. He chose to do his own thinking. And I had a lot of respect toward him for that. Now, he had a word that he used for his thinking. He called it fishing, because he would go down to the river bank or the lake bank, throw a line out into the water, chew tobacco, and sit back and do some really good hard thinking. And I was with him one day during the latter part of the summer, during the summer season, and it was the latter season of his life too. And I was skipping rocks in the water as usual, and he didn't like me doing that because he was always of the idea that it scared the fish away. Well, I was of a different persuasion. I thought it actually attracted the fish because they come around to see what the commotion was all about. But in any case, he wanted to distract me from tossing stones in the water, so he says, "Son, does you know what happens when you dies?" And I thought just briefly, and I says, "No, Pa, I don't think I know exactly what happens when you dies, because I'd been used to being around death with my animals, and at 9 years old, I was somewhat familiar with death, but the mystery of death, which is typical for a 9-year-old. He says, "Well, it's like this. Whenever you dies, there's some fellows that goes out into the meadow or into the cemetery, and they digs a big hole in the ground. And then there's some other fellows that comes along and they covers you up." And about time he said that, that fishing line was strung out real good and tight. He jerked back really hard, so hard it threw his hat off, exposing his balding head and white hairs. Reeled in real fast to an empty hook, which he promptly rebaited with his cotton and dough, which he had made himself, expertly tossed it back out into the water, sit back down on the lake bank, spit a chew of tobacco far enough to reach into the water itself. And I was just watching him, and I says, I was a little disappointed by what he had told me, because he hadn't told me anything I didn't already know. So I says, "Pa," I says, "is that all there is?" He says, "What?" I says, "Is that all there is when you dies?" "Oh no, son, that's not near all there is to it when you dies. You see, you lays there a while, and then the spring rains come. And when the spring rains come, a miracle happens. There's thousands, no, there's even millions of little tiny seeds all in that soil. It's at the top of the ground and over your grave, and they start sprouting, they start bursting open. And there's roots that reach down into the soil down there where you're laying. And when they get down there, another miracle takes place, because you're gathered up into those roots, and you start ascending up into the smaller roots, the bigger roots, and on up into the stem of the grass or the shrub or whatever it is that's growing over your grave. And then you go out into the leaves, into the branches, and you're out there just in the warm sunshine. And then after a while, later on in the summer, a horse comes walking by. And you know, a horse likes to graze on grass and shrubs and whatever he can find. So that horse reaches his mouth down, gets him a big chomp of that grass over the top of your grave, takes it into his mouth, and there you are. You slide down his tongue, into his throat, slide down his throat, into his stomach, pop, you stay there for about a day or so. And then after that, you enter into the small intestines, and you go through there, twisting and turning, and then it's into the large intestines. And then before you know it, plop, you're right out there on the ground again. Well, I wasn't expecting him to say that. So he looks at me and he says, "Son, so now do you see the moral of the story?" And I thought just a moment, and I says, "Pa, no, I don't believe I do understand the moral of the story." And he says, well, son, it's like this. Says a short while from now, maybe it's just a few years from now, says you're going to be walking down the side of the road and you'll come up on a pile of horse manure. And whenever you do, whatever you do not kick it with your boot. Because if you do, you just might very well be kicking your own grandpa.